Welcome to Napa Valley Inside Out. I'm Latife Hayson, and I am delighted to be hosting this podcast, shining a light on one of the most beautiful and coveted lifestyles in the world. If you're interested in developing a property, planting a vegetable garden, making olive oil, fashion, architecture, interior design, county rules and regulations, biking paths, art, getting into the wine business, farming practices, the tax benefits of owning a vineyard, or the ultimate private tours and tastings, and all the fabulous annual cultural events we enjoy here, and so much more, then you won't want to miss this show. Every week I will be interviewing amazing talent, vintners, entrepreneurs, leaders, consultants, festival organizers, and well-known personalities in the Valley. They will share their knowledge, experience, advice, goals, passions, and their best-kept secrets. I'm back with Daniel Lail of Lail Vineyards, and Robin is going to be telling us about her life growing up at Inglenook Winery, which is now owned by Francis Ford Coppola, and she's going to share her journey in the wine business with us. Welcome back, Robin.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here again. I like it very much.
I love this story, the whole history of Inglenook, and you've been here being raised at Inglenook, one of the most spectacular winery estates in Napa Valley for sure.
It's a brilliant legacy, Latife, and it's always extremely frustrating to me to try and share the story because the story has arms and legs and the teeth that are floating around on the cabinet, so much to tell.
Yeah. But good for you for coming back and getting into the business. So you grew up in the vineyards of Inglenook, and you had no plans to get into the business, so you went to Stanford. And 2 years after graduating, your father sold the winery. And of course you were heartbroken and weren't really expecting it. But who did he sell the winery to?
So the winery was sold to United Vintners, which was a cooperative, and in 1964, and then in 1968, Hubline took over the winery. Actually, became the functioning owners of the winery in 1969. The Hubline period was, for me as a human being, very disappointing. Disappointing because the idea was the bottom line and not so much the quality in the bottle. And they just proceeded. They also bought a Beaulieu, which was our wonderful we were confrères basically in the business and considered the Latife and Latour of Napa Valley prior to this happening. So, Hubline began doing a lot of jug wine and with pretty flowers on it, and it was hard. It was hard to see. And because basically that is attributable, I believe, to the fact that they were absentee landlords. For starters, they were domiciled in Connecticut, and the fact that they were liquor people, not wine people. And just to kind of emphasize that and how little they understood of the legacy that they had purchased, they built a huge warehouse right smack in front of Inglenook, which is a beautiful winery, absolutely beautiful, which you could see from Highway 29. Now you could not see it any longer because they built this ugly rectangular warehouse in which to store some of the massive amounts of wine that they were making for Beaulieu. So those things, not my property and not my business, but just hurtful. And there was an interim period, and that was when a fellow named Dennis Fife became the manager of the winery, and he worked with a guy named John Richmond, who was the winemaker. And those two men really basically defied the rulings from on far and started trying to recreate the great wines of Inglenook. And among other things, they made a wine called Reunion, and they used grapes from the Napa Vineyard, which had been part of Inglenook since 1947, I believe, and then some of the Inglenook vineyards as well. So they made a big effort at it, and they made some really, really lovely wines. And then, they kind of
petered out. Yeah, it
just did not work, because it just wasn't the vision of Hubline, if there was a vision indeed. And having said all of that, I want to tell you a really, really amazing story. Corporations are corporations, right? Mm-hmm. And at the time Hubline took over the winery, I made a comment, a verbal comment to the manager at the time, and I said, I would just love, I was 37, I think, at the time, I would love if you ever decide to sell this winery, I would like to have right of first refusal. It was a verbal comment to a local manager. In 1995, I received a telephone call from the chairman of Hubline in Connecticut, and he said, Robin, I believe that you were interested in possibly having a right of first refusal if we were going to put the winery on the market, and we're going to do so, and this is the price, and would you like to carry on? And unfortunately, the price was very modest at the time. It was $10 million. And I thought if I scrambled and wiggled and did everything I could possibly do, we might be able to put together a tenth of that. But that would mean that I would have a lot of partners.
A lot of partners,
and
yeah.
I would be a minority partner, and partnerships are difficult. So I decided not to move forward and called Francis Coppola and said, you've got to do it.
Oh, so you called him. That's fantastic.
He had owned the back part of the property since 1975.
1975. That was the home that he bought originally, right?
The home and the mountain. Yeah, it was huge.
How many acres were there with Inglenook when it was first sold?
The winery, when it was sold,
Yes.
90 acres. So it was just the front pieces of vineyard and the winery. And everything behind what we called Winery Hill, which is that little knoll
Yes.
that sits by the winery there, belonged to Francis Coppola.
Oh, he already owned that, or he bought it from your family?
He bought it from my mother, yes.
Yeah. Well, what was the largest amount of acreage you had before any sales?
So it once again kind of swings back and forth. I believe that the number is 1,830 acres.
You know what? I read close to 2,000. I mean, that is unbelievable.
Oh,
yeah.
And it wasn't ever purchased in one chunk. Back to Niebaum again. He just kept adding to it and adding to it.
He was adding to it. And then did Francis buy most of it?
He bought all of it, yes.
He bought the whole lot? He's got 1,800 acres?
Well, I don't know. How many
I
acres?
mean, he could have sold
you.
them quietly.
No,
but yeah.
no. He's got everything. Yes.
Wow.
So that was a brilliant thing that he did, and it wasn't easy, and he did it.
Incredible.
And I love that he did it. So
yeah, and really is very sad, isn't it? Because to think that your family was making wines that were just world class. And I'm wondering if Hubline bought that property because of the acreage. Did they buy the acreage with? No, only the. Oh, I see. I wonder. It must have had a big permit. Why would they buy a winery that is making incredible cult wines? I don't know what they called them back then, but we call them cult wines today. I wonder why they would want that property. It might have had a really big permit.
I don't think so.
No?
Honestly, no.
Really?
I just
Incredible.
think that it was quite famous, and they thought it would be nice to have in their portfolio. Same with Beaulieu.
And they didn't have it for very long, and then Francis got it. And it's very hard to turn back the clock. I think Robert Mondavi Wines really experienced that when they were selling Woodbridge from the winery, right? And I remember, because when Francis Ford Coppola bought that winery, I was working with an investment banker on his board. And Francis said, I'm not going to make this mistake. I'm going to take my Coppola wines over to I'm going to buy another winery and separate my Rubicon wines from my Coppola wines. The Coppola wines were less expensive, and take most of the memorabilia from the movies and put it in another winery, which was very smart, because once you start selling, your really fabulous wines and really inexpensive wines in the same winery, I think they end up being not known for the fabulous wines that they make. Well,
it got to the point that did not happen immediately. Basically what happened was that he started making these wines and they were successful. And it got to the point where there were 100,000 visitors on a weekend day. And that just would have destroyed the property eventually, just too much traffic. And so, and Francis has always been about preserving that land.
That's great.
I love him dearly for that. And Ellie, they have a passion for it. And which is wonderful.
And they bought back the name in 2011, Inglewood. So it's just, the legacy is wonderful.
It is wonderful. It really is. I just wanted to say something in our last discussion, Latife. You were talking about being 3 generations. I'm the 4th generation in my family, and we have 2 more generations here now. So we're 6 generations into Napa Valley, and we've been making wine here for just 1 year shy of 140 years.
It's incredible,
So it's pretty thrilling,
So I was just going to get to that. So you and John were living down in the Bay Area, and you moved back here after your father passed away. In 1972, did you move back? Yeah. And what did you think you were going to do when you first came back? Did you know that you wanted to get into the business, or did you just want to come home?
None of the above. So the reason we came back was that John, my husband, had been hired by Bud von Lobensel's to be the marketing director of Oakville Vineyards. And Oakville Vineyards was a lovely project which was saddled with 400 partners. Can you imagine? Very difficult. And they ended up buying the back property of Inglenook, or my home, from my mother. They were the first people to buy it. And so John and I moved back to Napa Valley. I just kept thinking about Thomas Wolfe, you can't go home again, you can't go home again. And we were living in a house right on the highway in Oakville, a little house that was so loud, and when the road noise was so loud, and when the
even back then.
Oh my goodness, yes. And at night when the children were sleeping, they were in the front bedroom, and trucks would come by and use their Jake brakes, pop, 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 and the poor little children would wake up. It was very hard, and I ended up giving tours through my home, which was still my home in my head, to all these partners from Oakville Vineyards. So it was a humbling, really humbling, and so good for me, I guess, but it was not fun. It was really, really hard. And I'm sorry, I forgot what your question was now. I kind of went wandering off into the weeds.
So what was your plans? And so...
So my plan was definitely, pardon me for interrupting you, my plan was definitely not to go in the wine business.
Wow.
No. And why was that? Because I came from the best.
Right, yeah.
I came from the best, and John and I didn't have much money, as a matter of fact, no money. And I just looked at this whole thing, and there's the 1,800 acres and the winery and the beauty and the...
how could
and
you
I
imagine?
thought, how can I do that in one generation?
Right.
Impossible. And I wasn't a very good businesswoman at the time either, so...
Well, things have changed.
Oh, thank you so much.
So then enter Bob Mondavi, and I think he wanted to encourage you to get into the wine business, and he hired you as his assistant. And tell us about that experience.
Well, it was a grand experience.
I can imagine.
I was, I just had an opportunity there that was quite unique as an executive assistant. And so that opportunity was, in addition to the executive assistant work that I was doing, first of all, I negotiated a flex time schedule. which made me very unpopular with the rest of the ladies that
Because of your children.
Uh-huh.
And this was back in 1975,
because
right?
I had been the executive director of the Volunteer Center of Napa County, which I had started in 1974.
Right. Yes.
So, and I had read this book, this great book by a crazy guy named Richard Bowles, What Color's Your Parachute? And one of the things it said is negotiate your own deal. You know, if you find a place you want to work and negotiate your own deal. So I did the best I could. But let me talk about Bob. So I had the opportunity to go to so many tastings. I had the opportunity to see how a winery is run from the top down. I had the opportunity to travel on behalf of the winery and with the winery. I had the opportunity to attend almost every lunch that was given with all the VIPs coming from all over the world. It was an extraordinary, lucky position. And today, what is my philosophy? It's a little bit John Daniel, but it's mostly Robert Mondavi, and it is all about sharing what you have and building a strong Napa Valley. You know, this is a national treasure.
Yeah, you
and
really worked with the best.
I would like, if I have the time, I would like to try and see if we cannot be established as a World Heritage Site. So
that would be
we'll see.
extraordinary.
We'll see.
That would be
We'll see.
extraordinary. Yeah. So wonderful times with Robert Mondavi. You learnt a lot. You're with him for 5 years, and then I think you then went to work with Bill Harlan, who was a developer at the time, right? Was that the next step? Oh no, you bought into.
No, you're right. No, you're good. You're good. So yes, I went to work for Bill Harlan.
Yes,
and there was a reason, and the reason was that now, you know, honestly, Latife, I had an epiphany about Bob Mondavi about a year ago. I'm writing a book, and which is now stuck at an agent and going nowhere, so in New York. But nonetheless, I had this epiphany about Bob. And I realized so clearly that he didn't need me as an executive assistant. I was a crazy little handful of human. But I think that when the winery was sold originally, Inglenook Winery was sold, Dad never spoke to him about the fact that he was trying to sell it. And when it got sold, Bob found out, and he was absolutely heartbroken because he had such his own passion for this amazing legacy. And he would have loved to have bought the winery. And he would have made it happen. Whether he had any money or not, he would have made it happen. So I believe that he just said, time for her to get going.
Oh.
And he never said a word about it to me, not a word. But he became my mentor. He did, and long after I left. And he had these great homilies I loved so much, and one of them, his favorite, was "It's a great life if you don't weaken."
Oh, I love
and
that.
then one of my favorites is "It's all in how you look at things." And do you realize how lucky you are? And just these wonderful sayings that he ran his life with, you know, which were very simple, and he was the farthest thing from simple. But I also went through all his, you know, kind of his down period when Rainier was trying to take control of the winery, and then he settled his suit with his family and bought the company back, which was
really
going
hard
into,
times.
Oh,
yeah,
it was
very
fabulous.
hard times. Yeah, yeah.
So it was.
So you learned a lot.
I learned a huge amount. I really did. Yeah.
I think you went from there. Didn't you buy into Dominus with your sister and another partner?
No. Then I went to work for Bill.
You did work for Bill.
And I was interested in doing that because I knew Bill was interested in the wine business, and I thought I had this piece of vineyard that I was able to save from the settlement of my father's estate, which was called Napa Nook, and I figured that I had the vineyard and Bill and his partners had the business sense and that we could start a winery.
Smart.
So that's why I went to work for him, and I was his secretary. And that was another amazing amazing journey, which ended up not only did we start Maryville while I was there in 1983, but we came back up to take over the management of Meadowood. And the managing director quit because he found out we were going to fire him. And so I became managing director of Meadowood for a period of time, a year and a half. No hotel training. Meadowood was emergent at that time. It was coming out of the curtains.
Yes.
And then just to make things really exciting, in 1986, Bill bought Sunny St. Helena Winery. So I was managing director of the winery for 10 years. But in 1982, just to keep things really interesting, before all of that, I had made a joint venture, a partnership actually, with my sister, with Christian Moex, arguably the most famous man in the wine business in the world because of his association with Petrus, which he had built into such an amazing legacy with his partner and his father. And we co-founded Dominus.
Incredible how far you came.
Fantastic education. Such an
across
opportunity.
the board with everything. Yeah, with absolutely everything. Then you sold your partnership in Dominus, and you actually became president of Maryville Winery, right?
I was president for 10 years.
For 10 years. Was that the one that you were calling Sunnyside?
Sunny St. Helena.
Yes. Is that what it was called? Sunny St. Helena, and then I was
wondering where that was. That was really the first winery that was built in Napa Valley.
Oh my goodness.
Following Prohibition. Oh. And it was built by a guy named Jack Riorda. And when Bob Mondavi got out of Stanford, he talked his father into coming from Lodi and putting together a partnership with Riorda. And 3 years after they made that partnership, Sunny St. Helena Winery was making 1 million gallons of wine. So,
wow.
Yeah.
A huge permit, which you couldn't have today. Oh, I mean, there's one on Zinfandel Lane, but that's about it. That's incredible. We only have about 7 or 8 minutes left, and I want to talk about Lail Vineyards. So you, after having all this amazing experience with incredible mentors, at the age of 55, in 1995, you decided to start your own business and continue the family legacy. Tell us about that. I mean, that must have been pretty challenging.
It was really exciting. It was really exciting in the full sense of the word, both sides.
Yes.
And actually, it wasn't just me. I had a meeting with John, my husband, and our daughters, Erin and Shannon, and said, look, this will take every farthing we've got, and then we'll get into really big debt besides, because what we've got is not enough to do this. And are you interested in picking up the traces and going forward? And everybody said yes. And so...
How old were the girls, at that time?
The girls were in their 20s, in their mid-20s.
And kudos to them, because they've honored that all these years later.
Oh, my goodness, they have. Yes, absolutely. Yes. They've been fabulous. And... It was exactly like standing on a cliff and taking a flying leap off the cliff. And you could see the rocks down below with the waves and the sharks and the whole business. Or you could soar,
Right.
So there's a lot of flapping wings,
Oh, my Lord.
That's been an amazing, and that very year, by the way, we made an agreement with Philippe Melka, who has been our winemaker for 23 years. And this is a very unusual and beautiful association. And I met him first when I was still at Dominus. So.
And was he an intern at Dominus when you met him?
He was a stagiaire, so that means that he would come in and do a certain job and then go back. And he did 2 stages there. Yeah.
It's an amazing marriage. Now, I think that you did all this on a wing and a prayer. You didn't have a lot of money, right?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, no, there wasn't a lot of money. No.
Yeah. So tell us about that for all the people that we hear want to come to the wine up to Napa Valley and start a wine label or get into the business. I always tell them we should do coffee.
We should do coffee.
Now I'm going to say you should have coffee with Robin. Yeah.
Well, now I really honestly here I think we have a surfeit. We have so many producers here, but But I feel so strongly about this, Latife. You know, life is difficult for people. We all are so brave and big smiles and all of that, but life has its little foibles and gotchas, and it's so important if people have a passion for something to follow their passion and to never give up. You know, I so believe in that mantra. You just never give up.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Okay, fine, it's hard. What are you going to do? Lie down and assume the lily position? It's silly. And it's really hard sometimes. It is really,
very, very
really hard.
Yeah.
And people are saying you really should quit. You can't make it, blah, blah. And justifiably so, you know. But among other things, I've just got this fabulous team that I work with that have been with me now for over a decade in some cases, and a new woman. She's new. She's been with me for 6 years.
Oh, yeah.
And they are brilliant and fabulous. And then there's Philippe and his team, and
Pete Richmond, who farms
Pete
for you, who's amazing,
who I adore, and who is a crackerjack, top of the heap, best farming manager in the county, and my family.
Yeah.
And those are the people. That's why it worked. It's not because of my good looks and charm. It's because
it's a team.
And then there was a banker who believed in us. Well, bankers don't do that. Bankers don't do that. They can't do that. They work by numbers. That's it. But this banker did do that and still does it today. And now we're, you know, we have black numbers.
Yeah, you're not in the red. That's a nice thing, isn't it?
It is, yes.
I don't think people really realize, and you know, of all the people I interview, that people have been here forever, they're still traveling to sell their wine, decades into the business. I mean, you never can rest on your laurels. It just doesn't walk out the door, right? I want to talk a little bit more about your wines. So I know that Philippe has been making for over 23 years, so that's how long you've been in your own business with Lail. And you've had a lot of wonderful scores. So tell us about your wines and what you really think the secret to your success has been. I mean, I could tell you straight off the bat, anyone who's able to keep people as a team, the village together, and you're not constantly changing staff, that speaks volumes to who you are as a person and how you treat people, because everybody's always turning over, particularly today. When you're able to keep people and you have that longevity, that is really key. But then we have the incredible wines, which you have managed to do the same with your wines, and they are as exquisite as your great-grand uncles were, and and as your father's, when your father was the owner of Inglenook. So tell us what you think the secret has been, and share with us whatever you'd like to share about your wines.
So we make 5 wines. We make 3 Cabernets and 2 Sauvignon Blancs. I agree with you 1,000,000%, Latife, that if you ever think you've arrived, you have, and you're at the exit.
You've arrived at the exit, yes, I love that, yeah.
So we started out to make just one wine, you know, which we named, can you imagine my wow, get over yourself, starting out with a brand new winery and naming the wine after my father, or the J. Daniel Cuvée. And then we added a blueprint Cabernet, and we have these wines. The wines, you know, with my forebearers, my legacy, my history, my heritage, I just have to make wines that are beautiful.
Yes, you do.
And I'm so blessed not only to have some beautiful vineyards. We only own 6 acres of vineyards ourselves. That's the money thing again. But we have long-term contracts with a number of growers that we've been working with that are very important to us, who have beautiful vineyards. But I'm so blessed with Philippe, because he's, in my opinion, you know, Parker called him one of the 9 most influential winemakers in the world, and and I'll second that anytime. I think he's a wizard, and he's such a good human being.
Yes.
Besides,
Yeah.
he's loyal, and he's never wavered or faltered, or when the times were really tough for us, he was right there. So these wines are like children. They're like children.
Right.
And
Nurture them.
and people sometimes say, well, what is which one do you like the best? And of course, my response to that is, do you have children?
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. Yeah.
So they're also special. We have a Sauvignon Blanc that we were the first in the United States to make this wine in this fashion, which has become has a following, a strong following. All the wines, we're very lucky to have a following. But this wine is a Sauvignon Blanc made in the Bordeaux style. So the wine is fermented and aged in all new French oak and stays in the barrels on the lees for 18 to 20 months.
Ooh.
So in essence, it's made like a red wine.
Yes.
Extraordinary. But each one of these wines, I'm arguably, hopefully, proud of.
Oh yes.
Because they are beauties, and because each year, and because Philippe is and now he has a man working with him by the name of Mayan Kochitsky, and a young lady named Megan Zobek. These people, we share our vision. Our vision
Together.
is the same. How lucky is that? So there's no fooling around. It's just we know, and we work together as closely as we possibly can. And each year we try to make wines that are a little bit better than the wines we made the year before. And our goal, perfection. I don't care if it's quantifiable or not. The chase after perfection beats to me the chase of excellence. I want to go beyond. I want to go as far as we can go. I hope always to, before I go away, to see a time when our wines are absolutely, without question, wines that people maybe have to have, as part of their collections. We've been very lucky. The critics have been enormously kind to us. I think you may know that Parker gave our J. Daniel Cuvée 2012 100 points.
Yes.
And the following year, he gave our J. Daniel Cuvée 99 plus points, which is very annoying.
I can imagine.
But,
Wow.
the scores have continued to be so high, and we're just so incredibly lucky.
Yeah. Well, there's no luck. Thank you so much for coming on the show. There is no luck. This is just by your guidance and your passion and love.
Thank you.
And congratulations, really.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You've done your family proud, truly.
Thank you. How lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you next week.